This is Great Travel, where we uncover the truth behind the postcard. Boston, a city of red brick charm, ivy-covered dreams, and histories etched in stone. Tourists walk the Freedom Trail chasing revolution. Students fill Harvard Yard chasing legacy. But just beyond the polished cobblestones, another Boston waits, one not printed in the brochures. Here, the wind howls down Commonwealth Avenue like a warning. At the intersection of brilliance and brutality, people sleep under iron bridges while the lights of MIT blink indifferently across the river. How does a city with some of the world's finest hospitals leave thousands exposed to the cold? This isn't just a story of homelessness. It's a confrontation with the mirror. The cracks in Boston's foundation don't lie in its buildings, they lie in what we choose not to see. If you're ready to see Boston like never before, not through its fame, but through its forgotten corners, drop a 9 in the comments. Ever wondered what's hiding behind those historic red bricks? Boston is no stranger to prestige. With ivy-covered walls and billion-dollar skylines, it's easy to believe this city has everything figured out. But behind the facade of excellence, the truth tells a colder story, especially in winter. In the last 5 years alone, homelessness in Boston has risen by nearly 20%, according to the Massachusetts Housing and Shelter Alliance's 2025 report. The most heartbreaking surge? Families with children. Nearly 4,000 students in Boston's public schools are now considered homeless. Picture this, trying to focus in math class after sleeping in the backseat of a car or on a thin cot inside an overcrowded shelter. That's not just discomfort, it's a daily battle for survival that plays out behind school doors and bus stops. The epicenter of this crisis has a name, Mass and Cass. Once a bustling corridor between Massachusetts Avenue and Melnia Cass Boulevard, it has now become Boston's most visible wound. What used to be traffic and commerce has turned into a battleground of addiction, mental health collapse, and human resilience. Here, the air is thick with the sharp bite of fentanyl and the soft decay of forgotten dreams. Sidewalks are lined with tents, some patched with duct tape, others collapsing in the snow. Makeshift camps rise overnight and vanish by dawn, only to return a few blocks down. It's not a scene from a post-apocalyptic film, it's Boston in 2025. And what makes it most unsettling is the diversity of those living on the margins. This isn't just a type of person. These are young people, especially LGBTQ+ youth, disproportionately represented among the unhoused. Many have been rejected by their families. According to the Trevor Project's 2024 survey, nearly 40% of homeless teens in Boston identify as LGBTQ+, with physical or emotional abuse at home being a common cause. There are veterans, too, men and women who once wore the uniform, who now battle PTSD and bureaucratic red tape instead of enemies. They didn't fail the system failed them. And then, there are the elderly, displaced by rising rents or unable to navigate digital housing platforms. They quietly slip through the cracks of a city that has moved on without them. Let's not forget the undocumented. People who fled war, poverty, or persecution, only to face legal status as another invisible wall. Barred from shelters and aid, their only option is exposure to cold, to danger, to isolation. These stories are varied, but they all echo one haunting truth. This crisis isn't new. It has been simmering beneath the surface for decades. Yes, Boston has emergency shelters. Yes, it has launched initiatives. But every winter, as the Charles River freezes over, so do the lives of hundreds of human beings. Shelters max out. Blankets are rationed. People are forced to choose between the noise and chaos of a packed room or the freezing dignity of the sidewalk. There's a brutal irony in a city known for its world-class hospitals, brilliant minds, and some of the most expensive real estate in the country, while thousands sleep without a roof, a bed, or a plan for tomorrow. Well-meaning policies drip down slowly from government buildings, but on the ground, the crisis spreads like frost across February pavement. So the question remains, how did we get here? And more urgently, what are we going to do about it? This isn't background noise anymore. It's an alarm bell echoing down every alley, across every bridge. And it's time we listened. How does one of America's oldest and wealthiest cities become a place where thousands sleep without shelter? To understand this crisis, we have to peel back the layers, starting with the one that cuts deepest, housing. In Boston, rent doesn't rise. It climbs, like ivy scaling the brick walls of Beacon Hill, smothering anyone who can't keep up. In 2025, the average one-bedroom apartment costs over $3,300 per month, swallowing more than half the paycheck of a working-class resident. And that's if you can even find a place. Vacancy rates have dropped below 3%, turning the hunt for affordable housing into a high-stakes lottery. Subsidized housing? A mirage on paper. Waitlists stretch 5 to 10 years. By the time your name is called, you may have already lost everything. But housing is just the outer shell. Peel it back, and you hit the next layer: income and employment. Boston's skyline keeps rising, but wages crawl. Service industries, restaurants, janitorial work, retail still pay barely above the $16 minimum wage. Enough for groceries, maybe. Not for rent. Even those working full-time, parents pulling double shifts, night workers cleaning offices they'll never afford to rent, are ending up in shelters. The numbers don't lie, but more importantly, they don't add up. And then there's a darker, quieter force beneath it all: mental health and addiction. These aren't just contributing factors. They are snapped lifelines. In 2025, 42% of Boston's unhoused report living with a severe mental illness. Another 38% battle substance use disorders. But even when help is sought, it doesn't arrive in time. Clinics are overwhelmed. Waitlists are long. Housing with wraparound care is almost non-existent. And when stigma is stronger than compassion, treatment becomes a privilege, not a right. These invisible wounds are often born from trauma: childhood abuse, domestic violence, generational poverty. It's no coincidence that women fleeing unsafe homes are among Boston's fastest-growing homeless demographics. They escape one kind of violence, only to face another: cold, hunger, and neglect, in a city that offers too few beds and too many closed doors. Add to that a broken foster system and families cycling through hardship for generations, and you begin to see this crisis didn't erupt overnight. It was built, brick by brick, scar by scar. Then there are those the system barely sees: veterans returning home to battle PTSD and red tape. In 2025, they made up 11% of Boston's homeless population. Undocumented immigrants fleeing war or poverty are locked out of aid by a passport they don't hold. And those living with disabilities face mazes of bureaucracy, where simply applying for housing becomes a full-time job, one they're often too exhausted to complete. Each of these groups fights a different battle, but they're all caught in the same storm. These aren't isolated problems. They're tangled roots, twisting beneath the surface, cracking the concrete of our streets until one day, the sidewalk gives way. So next time you pass someone curled up under an overpass, ask yourself, what systems failed them? What second chances were never offered? Whose story never got heard? Homelessness in Boston isn't just about housing. It's a mirror. And what it reflects is a society that measures success in square footage, but forgets the value of dignity, security, and belonging. Until we face these root causes head-on, any solution, no matter how well-meaning, will be nothing more than a bandage over a much deeper wound. Behind every statistic, there's a heartbeat. Behind every tent pitched against a frozen sidewalk, there's a name. A story, a reason. This isn't just about policies, it's about people. And to truly understand homelessness in Boston, we have to stop looking from a distance and start listening up close. South Bay, under the highway overpass, where the wind cuts like glass. Anthony, 52, once built homes for other people. Now he stands outside his own, a second-floor unit in Roxbury through Housing First. He tells us, it wasn't just the cold that got to me. It was the silence. Like I'd stopped existing. The injury that ended his construction job spiraled into debt. His marriage dissolved. Then came the street. But here's where the story bends, not ends. You're still here, Anthony, I imagine his caseworker saying, sliding a folder across the table. Not just surviving, living. Today, Anthony works part-time at a local hardware store. He earns little, but he says, I got my name back. I'm not just another shadow in the street anymore. And tucked inside his wallet is a photo of a lunchbox in two hands, his granddaughter's. That's his warmth now. It's 7 a.m. in Mass and Cass. The sun hasn't climbed yet, but Kelly has. Into the driver's seat of her mobile clinic van. She's been doing this for 7 years. Administering antibiotics behind dumpsters. Wrapping wounds in silence. Handing out socks like gold. We don't just give bandages, she says. We build trust. One conversation at a time. One man returns just to say thank you. Another leaves a folded paper crane. She remembers a tune someone hummed once during a wound cleaning. Let it be, they whispered, trembling. These stories don't end in tragedy. They pulse with defiance, with dignity, with something stubborn and beautiful, resilience. Because homelessness is not a moral failure. It is a societal fracture. And yet, in every voice, there's proof that compassion still matters, that second chances are still worth giving. It's easy to feel overwhelmed when facing the scale of Boston's homelessness crisis. But underneath the frost and the concrete, something else is taking root: small, determined efforts quietly changing lives. One of the most promising strategies? Housing first. Unlike traditional models that require people to be sober, employed, or stable before getting a roof over their heads, housing first flips the script. Give people a permanent place to live, then help them heal. It's simple, but it works. According to the National Alliance to End Homelessness, cities that adopted housing first saw a 45% drop in chronic homelessness over 5 years. Boston is now scaling up the program, and while the waiting lists are long, the early signs are encouraging. But a set of keys isn't enough. You can't hand someone a door and expect them to walk through years of trauma alone. That's where mobile health units come in. Nurses, caseworkers, and mental health counselors who don't wait behind clinic doors. They go to tents, to alleys, to abandoned buildings. In 2025, these teams treated over 12,000 people, bandaging infected wounds under lamplight, administering psychiatric evaluations next to shopping carts, offering Narcan and whispered reassurance in the middle of frozen intersections. Kelly, a street nurse we met earlier, describes it best. It's not just about medicine. It's about being seen, about showing up. But even as the care arrives, the cold does too. Boston winters don't ask permission. They come sharp and sudden, and for those without shelter, they can be deadly. That's why emergency shelters matter. On a single night in January 2025, shelters reached 98% capacity, overflowing. Churches opened their basements. Community centers set up cots. Some were turned away, others were squeezed into spaces meant for half as many. A hot meal, a cot, a moment of warmth, none of it permanent. But for many, it's the difference between surviving the night or not. And what comes after that warm meal? The next day must offer more than survival. Across Boston, nonprofit groups have launched job training programs tailored for people who've lived on the streets. In one kitchen, men who used to cook over open fires now learn to craft restaurant meals. In another workshop, a woman repairs a bicycle for the first time in years. At Project Hope, over 600 people found stable jobs in 2024. Not just jobs, purpose. A paycheck, yes. But more than that, proof that they still belong to something. I'm learning again, one graduate told us. How to show up. How to believe in myself. Even in the smallest ways, like ironing a shirt before an interview. But none of that matters without affordable housing to land on. That's why the city's recent investment, boosting funding for low-income housing development by 30%, is more than just a budget line. It's a blueprint. In Mattapan, the Grove Hall redevelopment project is rebuilding more than walls. It's rebuilding community. Solar-powered apartments. Shared gardens. Rent prices that working families can actually afford. The demand is still far greater than the supply. But every brick laid is a promise. So no, the system isn't perfect. Many still fall through the gaps. Bureaucracy delays access. Resources don't always reach those in crisis. But if this city has taught us anything, it's this. You can't fight homelessness with numbers alone. You need compassion, and structure, and a plan. And in Boston, those seeds, however fragile, have been planted. When we imagine solving homelessness, our minds often go to big institutions, governments, massive nonprofits, national strategies. But real change? It rarely begins with headlines. It begins quietly, with ordinary people doing extraordinary things. In Boston, community doesn't just live in zip codes. It lives in action. In small kindnesses that ripple outward, changing one life at a time. Each night, while the city sleeps, volunteers walk through subway stations, parks, and overpasses, handing out hot meals, clean socks, and dignity. You still matter, one woman whispered to a man as she passed him a cup of soup last winter. Organizations like Pine Street Inn and Boston Warm depend on locals, not just to deliver food, but to build connection. In 2025 alone, over 1 million meals were served by mobile units and shelters, many prepared in borrowed kitchens and delivered by strangers who became lifelines. But it's not just about food. A retired attorney donates time to help tenants fight evictions. A teenager organizes coat drives with friends after school. A grandmother teaches computer skills at the public library. These gestures aren't grand, but they are powerful. Because when they meet a basic human need, no act is too small. Some go further. Take Haley House Bakery Cafe, where those once unhoused now knead dough, pour coffee, and start over shift by shift, loaf by loaf. or Commonwealth Kitchen, which offers culinary training to people rebuilding their lives. These aren't just jobs. They're second chances wrapped in flour, heat, and morning light. A 2024 study found that 72% of program graduates remained housed and employed a year after placement. That's not a stat. That's transformation. And the vision doesn't stop with job training. Some in the community are reimagining what housing can be. In Mattapan, 20 people who once slept outside train stations now live in solar-powered tiny homes. Built in part by volunteers, each unit is under 200 square feet. But what they offer is vast: privacy, autonomy, dignity. Meanwhile, in Dorchester, a plot of soil became a community garden, managed by those formerly unhoused and now feeding shelters with fresh produce. What began as survival has grown into symbolism. A seed, a second start, a harvest rooted in hope, and perhaps the most powerful tool of all? Stories. At Spare Change News, unhoused individuals sell newspapers filled with their own writing, claiming their narrative, one page at a time. Across schools in Boston, the Compassion curriculum is teaching students through real-world simulations and guest speakers. A new generation is learning that homelessness isn't a failure, it's a problem that can be solved. Social campaigns like Boston Cares have reached over 200,000 people this past year, challenging stereotypes and calling the public to act, from donation drives to city hall meetings. Because here's the truth: empathy is contagious. The more we understand, the more we care. The more we care, the more we do. Yes, policies matter, but community is the breath behind every step forward. So when someone says, "There's nothing we can do," show them the cafe that offers jobs, the garden that grows food, the student collecting coats, the neighbor offering coffee, not judgment. Because ending homelessness doesn't always require a revolution. Sometimes, it just takes a city full of quiet courage, multiplied one act at a time. Hope doesn't always start at home. Sometimes, it arrives from places you least expect, carried by stories, models, and cities bold enough to try something different. Boston isn't alone in its struggle with homelessness, but it doesn't have to walk blind into the future. There are cities, both near and far, that have carved a path through the same storm. Take Houston, Texas. At first glance, it couldn't be more different from Boston. But behind the skyline and the climate lies a story worth studying. In the last 10 years, Houston has reduced its homeless population by more than 60%. Not by building more shelters, not by criminalizing tents. They did it by embracing a single radical idea: housing first. Give people a place to live immediately. Then surround them with what they need: case managers, addiction treatment, job training, mental health care. It wasn't just a city initiative. Over 150 nonprofits and faith groups united under one vision, using a shared data system to avoid duplication and track success. The result? Transformed lives, saved resources, and a blueprint now being studied across the country. But the lesson doesn't stop at the border. Across the ocean, in Helsinki, Finland, a quiet revolution has taken place. In 2025, fewer than 1,000 people were officially unhoused across the entire country. Most weren't even on the streets. They were staying temporarily with friends or family. How? Finland didn't treat homelessness as a charity issue. It treated it as public infrastructure, just like roads, schools, or water systems. Every person without housing was assigned a housing counselor. Every residence had trained social workers. And the government didn't just build units. It built support systems around those units. Because in Helsinki, housing isn't a reward. It's a right. Back in the US, there's another quiet movement underway, this time in the Pacific Northwest. Portland, Oregon, is redefining what shelter means. There, vacant land has become home to entire villages of tiny houses. Each unit is modest, about 200 square feet, but they come with heat, shared bathrooms, even community kitchens and gardens. More than 1,000 people now live in these spaces. And over 70% report improvements in mental health and feelings of safety compared to traditional shelters. What Boston can learn is clear. From Houston, the power of collaboration. From Helsinki, the necessity of long-term investment. From Portland, the value of creativity and scale. No, Boston doesn't need to reinvent the wheel, but it does need to make it turn in the right direction. And fast. This city has its own culture, politics, and geography. But that's not a reason to stall, it's a call to adapt. Because here's the truth, the solutions already exist. They've been tested, they've worked, The question now is whether Boston will choose to lead or continue watching from the sidelines while others light the path forward. Homelessness is not just about economics. It's a mirror reflecting where our systems have failed. But change begins with empathy. And in a city like Boston, steeped in history, shaped by struggle, driven by minds that have changed the world, there's no excuse for inaction. Under the frozen stillness of the Charles River, Boston tells two stories, one of brilliance and one of survival and silence. Homelessness here isn't just a crisis, it's a mirror. But this story isn't finished, and neither is our role in it. If this touched you, don't let it end here. Comment what you believe Boston should do next. Like if you believe housing is a human right. Share to keep these voices heard. Subscribe to Great Travel Documentary for more untold journeys. Because change begins with awareness. And awareness begins with watching. Thank you for being here.